Today's podcast is a part of a series about the members of a network that I am a part of called Women Execs on Boards. All of the women in this series have completed programs through the Harvard Business School to prepare them for corporate governance. I wanted to tell their stories because I'm so inspired by the women who are in this network. They are high-level, high-profile women, but when you look behind the scenes, you see that they have worked very hard to get to where they are. They've been through so many different trials, traumas, and they've just kept getting back up and climbing and working hard to get to the top. And the really amazing thing is that they're leaving the ladder down and reaching back down in the organizations to pull up other women and men into leadership positions. And so I can't wait for you to hear their story. I hope you enjoy this podcast series.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am here today with Jessica Bell Vanderwall. Welcome, Jessica, to the program.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity.
So you started a company in the middle of a pandemic. You're the CEO and founder of Frame Fertility. Can you tell us a little bit about starting a company in the middle of a pandemic and what your company does?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that I feel like I planned on, but I don't think any plans that anyone had in 2020 are really being held to super firmly. But, I came into 2020 thinking about it as a transitional year regardless. I had just moved from San Francisco to North Carolina to be closer to family and to help to support a transition happening with our family business. And I was thinking about what to do next. And interestingly enough, I think this time during COVID, during the pandemic, where I've gotten to be home with my family and think about what I want to do, it felt like a true merger of the professional and personal life. And the company I started is truly that type of business. So I started to reflect on what I want to do next. I was also welcoming a newborn, as I mentioned earlier, in June, which I'll say whole separate conversation on giving birth and having a newborn in a pandemic. But as I reflected on that experience, interestingly enough, I went through a lot of fertility challenges to get there. And I'll say that my daughter was really the inspiration and being home with her for what I wanted to do next, because I thought about what really matters in life. And I looked down at this new little baby that I had and thought, well, actually, what really matters is making this whole experience better for someone else. I hope somebody doesn't have to go through what we went through to bring a baby into the world. And so it was very much kind of a merger of my personal life and my fertility challenges and my professional life. So I've worked in digital health for over 20 years. I've built technology products in healthcare. And so I thought, there's got to be a better solution for fertility to help couples plan in advance using a digital platform. How can I actually help to deliver a solution in that capacity? And funny enough, my husband was also kind of in the middle of a transition moving out here too. So we built the company together. And so I kind of feel like when you're stuck indoors quarantining together with your partner and a newborn, what do? You decide, well, all right, let's do something that really matters. And, as we looked down at our baby, we realized she's what really mattered. And so that's what we decided to spend our time on. And it's amazing what you can do when there's nothing else to do except for, work together on a company under one roof. So yeah, that's how we ended up getting to this place. And it's crazy, but at the same time, people are reflecting a lot on what they want to spend their time on and how to plan for a family. And so the business is also just perfectly timed. And we want to help people think about their fertility years in advance so that they're not surprised if they start trying and have issues. And people are starting to think about those things a lot more now, especially as fertility treatment was paused actually during the pandemic. So people have really had to take a step back and think about, well, how do I want this to proceed? And so we're a fertility advisor service, just like you have a financial advisor in your life. So that's kind of the capacity that we are serving in and helping individuals right now plan ahead for fertility.
So you probably have no competition, right? Other than other than a doctor, right? Who has, maybe a checklist of things that they're going through, but what an awesome service to offer, especially having been there and done that, right?
Yeah. It's funny that the space of women's health and kind of what's called femtech has actually exploded a lot over the past couple of years. But there's still a big gap in the market, at least the way we see it because all of the solutions are really around treatment. So how do I use IVF or egg freezing to get to my ultimate goal? And we want to use preventative care and planning. And so, we're not a quick fix solution. We're more of a take a step back, plan your life, just like you plan your career, you plan your finances, and we'll help you link the pieces together and also provide a clinical lens on that too. So we've brought clinicians to the table in that regard as well. So it's interesting. There's definitely some competition, but it's not the same approach as what we're using. And what we found is that OBGYNs actually really believe that a service like this should exist, but they don't have time to do it. They have, 15 minutes with a patient every year, and they'd love to sit down and help someone plan for fertility, but that's just not really part of their job. And so it gets lost in translation and no one really does it.
That's awesome. Well, you have a background in public health, right? You went to school and studied that, and then you had sort of a technology career. So this is really pulling it all together.
Exactly. So again, it's amazing what a pandemic will do to put things in perspective, and you start to focus on, well, what really matters and where are my skills? And again, my professional and personal interests aligned. And it's kind of just been a serendipitous path forward as a result.
Great. But I'm sure there were other challenges even before the pandemic, just in terms of your career.
Absolutely.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like many professional women and men, honestly, I've definitely struggled with spouts of burnout. In particular, as I mentioned, because I worked in kind of healthcare technology, I ended up getting involved in the startup space out in San Francisco for about 10 years. And I think tremendous experience from a professional standpoint, learned a lot, helped a company actually go from Series B all the way through to IPO and then an M&A event. But, that type of experience really wears on you. And, unfortunately, for better or worse, I definitely experienced a pretty severe burnout episode where I actually collapsed as a result of the stress I was under. I still remember reading Arianna Huffington's book around the same time, and she had a very similar experience where she collapsed at her desk. She hit her head on her desk and was bleeding from the head. Fortunately, I did not have that significant of an experience, but I did collapse. And for a long time afterwards, I went to different doctors and specialists, et cetera, and no one could figure out what was wrong. And now that I've had time to breathe from it, for better or worse, what doctors have really come up with is stress and the amazing workload and kind of burnout experience that people have when we're working really long hours and trying to take on a lot. That's something that actually does cause physical repercussions. Even though it doesn't have a clean medical diagnosis, it really is a main driver of a physical reaction like that.
So I think everyone watching this will understand stress, but I have a finance background, so I understand the Series B to IPO and M&A aspect. Can you just give some of the non-finance viewers a little bit more of an idea of what that's like, and actually what it's like being the person who's trying to get all that done?
Yeah. And I'll say, as I reflect on just in general my career, I had interesting kind of points along the journey where I probably pushed myself a little too hard. And I think there's a lot of, especially women out there, that can probably sympathize and have been through something similar, especially when you're trying to, kind of quote unquote, climb the corporate ladder. But in this specific instance, I was working for an early stage company. We were obviously trying to really grow quickly. And what that really means is everybody kind of pitches in, does, any work and all work that they can. Nobody really kind of colors just inside their job lines. And so I was working anywhere from 12 to 18 hours a day. And I had 5 jobs in 7 years, which in many ways, again, was tremendous. It's great to get to jump around and have all those different experiences. But I went from, managing a team of 4 to all of a sudden overnight managing a team of 40. And so there were just a lot of kind of ebbs and flows in that job. And with any startup, there's also a lot of highs and lows. And so you're dealing with things such as, having to lay off half your staff, or, having to cut budgets, or having to ramp up really quickly because you actually brought on 20 new customers. So again, there's highs and lows, but I think the physical, mental, and emotional kind of toll that can take on you, where you're riding the ride with the company, is really hard. And so I was doing that. Funny enough, I was also planning our wedding at the same time. We were moving from one apartment to another. There were just a lot of little pieces that, had I really taken a step back and realized what was happening, I probably would have known, oh, wow, this is too much. But, at the time, it just felt like this is what everyone else is doing. It feels like everybody else is working just as hard as me. How can I slow down? But yeah, it was definitely a lot of bad habits, not sleeping more than probably 4 or 5 hours a night, not eating well, not exercising. Again, it's just all that adds up. And unfortunately, I think, year over year, I had little blips, but when it causes you to physically collapse, you have to stop and pause and say, what is really going on here? And even then, I was still wondering, well, there's got to be something medically wrong, right? There's got to be something I can blame this on. And for a while, I thought maybe there was something that, we could treat and all of a sudden I'd be better. But in the end, if it's stress and kind of the work-life imbalance you have, there's nothing you really can do other than just say, okay, time out. How do I change this? And for me, unfortunately, it was hard to change within the kind of 4 walls of the company. I end up stepping back and quitting, and then realizing I needed to kind of reset my life in general. And sometimes that's what you have to do just to get perspective.
Today's podcast is brought to you by EDA, a human capital firm that provides leadership development for your top of the house executives. One of our services is assessment and selection. Whether you're hiring, promoting, or developing your talent, the right assessments can provide much needed insight. They reduce bad hires and help you identify key areas of strengths as well as development needs. If you're interested in learning more about our assessment and selection programs for your organization, please reach out at www.executivedevelopment.com.
So do you have any words of wisdom that maybe there might be younger viewers who are, maybe they're in a work environment like the one that you were in that's very fast paced and it seems exciting, and I know you're in sort of, in San Francisco and in the tech environment. And I know what that's like. Everyone's doing it. But no matter where you go, no matter who you talk to, it's sort of like being in Los Angeles and everyone's in the film industry, right?
Yeah.
But do you have it? I mean, just in terms of you're sort of going on your journey, now you've had time to look back.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me was actually once it all happened and I realized I needed to take a break, I ended up having one-on-one conversations with a lot of individuals I was working with as I was leaving the company. And I decided that I wanted to be transparent about my story. I wanted to kind of, quote unquote, bring my whole self to work, because I think I'd been kind of burying the stress and burying the burden I was carrying at work and trying to be strong and trying to be the leader that I felt everybody needed to be. But on my way out, I decided, well, I want people to know what really went on here. And more than anything, I wasn't blaming the company. I was more just saying, this is what I need for me. And what I found in every single conversation, there really wasn't any single one where it was different, was the person across the table said, I've so been there too. And in the end, we ended up having a dialogue around, well, how can I help support you? How can we make this different? And a lot of bonds were actually formed with individuals that I didn't even know that well when I was at the company. But when you kind of open up and actually share what's going on, again, I think people feel relieved. You could almost feel their shoulders go down, and they felt de-stressed and said, oh, I'm so glad to hear that someone like you has been through this too. Because again, I think when you try to portray this vision of strength, everybody thinks, well, see, again, she's doing it, she's fine. But I think when you actually expose that it's not fine, it's actually quite hard, again, people will, respond to that positively, but then you can also kind of troubleshoot together. And so, what's funny now is I keep in touch with a lot of, in particular, mentors, ex-bosses, et cetera. And I find us just, again, kind of sharing tips, sharing learnings, reaching out to one another when we need help. And, honestly, during something like this pandemic, that's been instrumental, I think, for everyone's survival. But you first have to start with, okay, opening up and saying, I'm struggling too. And so that's probably the biggest thing is I believe firmly now in bring your whole self to work. The more that you kind of share and actually decide to learn from one another, I think you can get through it together. And so that's probably the biggest learning I've had.
So would you change anything sort of looking back now, hindsight's 2020? I mean, you're talking about engaging with people probably sooner.
Yeah.
But anything else that you might have done differently? I mean, like where you are right now seems amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a new baby and you've got this amazing business that you started, and it's sort of the melting together of your background and your experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I'd change anything because, again, to your point, it brought me to where I am. I don't know if I would have had the kind of quote unquote guts to start something on my own, even though I thought about it, if I hadn't taken myself out of the kind of quote unquote rat race, right? I think it's really easy to kind of sometimes put your head down and work for someone else, but it's terrifying to actually start something on your own. And I don't think I would have gotten here had I just kept chugging along. And so it was painful. It was hard. It was not pretty for my family in particular. My husband, I know, had to watch me, really go through twists and turns, and he tried to pull me out a lot, but, never was successful. I regret that happened, but I don't know if I would change anything. Because again, I don't think then I would be where I am today, which is we now have a daughter. I think, I think about my fertility challenges in a stressful environment. There's no way I feel like we would have been able to have a child given that. So we have a daughter, we have a new company, we live closer to family, and all of those things I don't think we even considered before or even planned ahead for. So I don't think I would change anything, actually.
So what if someone's watching this who's sort of struggling right now with some of the challenges that you had? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, again, I would say, find colleagues or mentors or advisors that can kind of help you think through options and next steps. You're not alone. Again, I think there's a lot of individuals that are struggling at work, and probably even more so now if I think about everyone working remotely. And I think reaching out, even virtually, I think is just going to be helpful for people to have touch points as they go through this kind of personal and professional upheaval of work right now. So I would say, don't hesitate to ask for help. Don't hesitate to say, I need help. And I think that will really help you move forward and hopefully charge ahead with whatever you're struggling with. Because I think everybody's struggling these days, no matter what frame of life or what part of your journey you're in.
So what does the future hold for you, Jessica? I mean, you're still, you're a young woman. So what does the future look like?
Yeah, well, obviously we have the new business, which is super exciting. And, more than anything, I really want to change the outcome for women and their partners that are going through their fertility challenges. So whether that's continuing to charge ahead on our own business or being part of the mission some other way, and that's what I'm really passionate about right now. But in parallel, I've been really privileged and lucky to also start to expand my career professionally through board service, both nonprofit and private company board service. So I'm part of an organization called 2020 Women on Boards, and I'm the Carolinas chapter chair there, and have really been helping to champion board diversity in a lot of different regards. And I think that's something that, I have definitely grown a lot by participating and being on boards separate from my professional life. And so that's something that I'm definitely going to keep charging ahead on and keep learning from other women that are going through that right now. And then I think there's the personal side of things. So having a 3-month-old, I can only imagine what is ahead of us there. So as new parents, I'd love to say I know what the future holds, but I also know it's going to have its own twists and turns as well.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to share with people who might be watching this today, just in terms of your career path and some of your challenges and overcoming things?
No, I think we touched on pretty much everything that I would want to share. Again, I've been very blessed to have great advisors and mentors in my life. And I think what's interesting is through and through, especially during the pandemic, when I've reached back out to individuals to just touch base, I've really grown and learned from those conversations. And I think right now we all need a personal touch. And so I would just encourage people to not be afraid to reach out, to have a one-on-one. It's awkward to not be able to do that over coffee or in person, but I found that, phone calls or video calls, even though we're, I think, probably all exhausted with Zoom, are still really effective, and people need it. It's really easy to feel isolated right now. And I think for me, honestly, just reconnecting with individuals has been really powerful. And it's been really helpful for me professionally, but also personally. And so again, that would be probably the biggest takeaway I have right now is, reach out to people that you haven't even thought about for 10, 20 years and see what's going on with them.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Jessica. Really enjoyed hearing it.
Oh, thank you.
A special thank you to our listeners for taking time to tune in to this week's Real Life, Real Leaders podcast. We hope today's story inspired you. Check out previous episodes on the podcast to hear from more industry leaders, and check back next week as we speak to another leader and hear his or her great stories of triumphs and messy struggles. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share. I'm Bonnie Hageman, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week.